All right, good morning, everyone. So, we finally get a little pullback. It has been an insane past few days, so good to see some red. Otherwise, it actually starts to make you a little worried. Biggest down is Lumentum, then we've got Western Digital, Vertiv, not a major hit, but it's something. Surprisingly, I found Oracle has kind of stood up, and when you kind of look at the chart here, it's on a very kind of interesting comeback from the low of 137 to 200, and on a day where all semis are red. Uh, Pretty good to see. Yeah, cool. Anyway, let's move on. We got Iron AMD. Yeah, just red across the board. I think one thing is with optics, I feel like people are finally realizing that optics are overvalued, or it's kind of run ahead of itself. And how much are you really going to pay for future growth here? And we can kind of see in the chart. Look, I could be entirely wrong, and it pops past back 1,000. But until then, let's see how this chart plays out. Okay, let's jump over to Twitter and see what's going on there. Okay, let's see. MTSI. What is MTSI? Haven't heard of this ticker before, so would be good to check it. Okay, Macom Technology Solution Holdings. Massive guidance setup, 1.6 terabit cycle acceleration. So they posted 289 million in Q2 revenue, 20% year on year, but they're guiding 335, so 33% year on year growth for things. So seems like an optics play. Let's check out a brief overview of what is going on here. Okay. Dun, 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 dun. So up 8% on the day. Year to date is only up 93%. Okay, what's the market cap of this thing? 25 billion, so it's not necessarily super tiny. Earnings about $1.15 projected for July, so about $4 or $5 of EPS. And once again, that's the thing, at $336, it's still a north of 50 PE ratio, which always feels hard to get involved with. Let me say, how do you justify the higher PE ratio in your view? Seems like you're overpaying for a lot of future growth and execution potential. And that's the thing I do feel is genuinely true for optics. It's you are really kind of pushing it. Anyway, let's carry on with our scrolling. So a more fun way to ask about how people are positioned. Say, if you went into a coma for the next 6 months and came back to your portfolio down 50%, what would you think happened? Okay, no interesting comments. I would say certain parts of the AI stack got properly priced, and things that people paid a lot for in the future got priced at their present. That is what I think would have happened if you found yourself down 50%. Okay. Datadog up 31%. Okay, let's see. So revenue was $1 billion versus 958. EPS of 60 cents versus 52. 5,000 customers paying more than 100,000 a year. 20% year-on-year growth. Let's check out the Datadog chart while we're at it. Dog. Wait, is it or D-Dog? There we go. Oh, I wish they got dog. All right. So. Done. checking it out. So market cap is about 65 billion. EPS guidance was about 60 cents. A surprise of 9 cents. Uh, yeah, I mean, that's the thing that I feel like is just hard to get around with software. You're paying for incremental growth at this stage. Like when you have something like SanDisk that's growing 2, 3, 400% year on year, and is in forward PE ratio of 12, like why would you buy software? I just don't get it. Like you're like, oh, I can't wait for them to be 18% versus you look at something like SanDisk, just to really put this in comparison, right? It's like, oh, we're guiding $14, but we hit 23. We're going to be guiding $32, and they're probably going to hit 40 or 50, or even like 35, whatever it is. But it's like, it's so hard buying anything else when you kind of look at the sheer earnings power and growth rate of a lot of these hardware companies. And that's kind of where I get personally tripped up. I'm like, could Datadog make a recovery? Could software come back? Sure. But like, let's go back for a second, right? DDog. This is what I find like the absolutely weird idiosyncrasies of this market. So they're estimated to make 50 cents of earnings next quarter. Let's say magically they beat it, and for financial year 27 they make $2.50. I use very rough math here, but it's more so to illustrate a point. So you go 184 divided by 2.5, and you get a 73 forward XPE ratio on like very optimistic calculations. And let's just take the guidance over here of $32, right? 32 by 4, that gives you 128, right? And you go 1356 divided by 128, you get 10.6. Now, unless you think these earnings aren't sustainable, which I don't get why you would think that, because SSD is extremely, it's like the lifeblood of a lot of these agentic systems or like the AI build out. I just don't think you're allocating your capital correctly. Yeah, my hot take. Anyway, let's move on. So we got Datadog, some mRNA. I feel like every day you just find some ticker that you're like, what is this? Moderna. Okay, I think it's help. Flu vaccine. Okay, I'm not a health tech expert. I don't pretend to be one. I'm not going to try. So let's move on. Futurum's AI 15 is up 48% year to date. That's kind of bad in my view. If you're up 50% year to date, you've underperformed SMH. Like, look at this. If you're in semis, okay, they just 47, 48. Like, if I just put in SMH, I'd be at par. And if I invest in stocks, which I don't know what the difference in composition is, you'd be up 61%. So I'm like, bro, you're pretty bad at picking here. But hey, that's for a different time. Oracle turning out to be a nice trade, 100%. Okay, so Oracle, I've actually been loading up a bit more. I briefly showed the chart today. Oracle is one of like the few names that's still green in this market, and you kind of look here. To me, Larry Ellison is an absolute beast. One thing that I like strongly believe in is like you never bet against strong founders or strong leaders, and Larry Ellison is like one of the most generationally legendary leaders out there, or like CEOs, founders, whatever you want to call it, right? Like, look at this for example. All right, give me history of Larry Ellison's life. Bullet points, key achievements per decade. Yeah, I don't type properly to Claude because I just know it's going to figure it out. It's kind of actually made it bad because when I speak to or type to humans, I get a little sloppy, so I really need to work on that. Anyway, so he was born in New York to a 19-year-old single mother. Dropped out in 1964. Then he first built the first IBM mainframe, and he co-founded Oracle in 1977. Right, and they're the first commercial. First commercial meta for like SQL, which is like really what the entire industry or the world runs on. If you're not technical, SQL is basically the query syntax language that computers use for querying data. Nothing comes close to SQL. So like this guy's been in the game for like, it's 1979, so what, 80, 20, 20, 30, like over 50 years. Like, And IBM, of course, like got a bunch of large contracts, a lot of enterprise stuff, and became the undisputed leader in database management in 1992. He became a billionaire in 1993, blah, blah, blah. But what I find really cool, right, is so he does competitive sailing, and the backstory of how he got this. And I'll tell you why I think about this stuff, because like all of these companies are about the people that have built them, and you have to understand the people behind the ticker is not just like, oh, this is some chart that goes up and down, because it's the founder, it's the CEO who really puts their blood and energy into driving these things. So with Oracle in particular, let me say, tell me the story of how he got into sailing. Keep it 3 sentences. This I think is like a really telling one, right? Because he was actually in Berkeley at the time. Pretty sure. No. Tell me about his GF at the time and Berkeley. I know this information. I'm just trying to like think. Okay, so he basically got shit for not basically got pushed to like sailing when he was like fairly young in university, and he effectively does these things where he will go away from the company for a few years and come back, make a few moves, and then like disappear. He owns like a private island and whatnot. But really, this is a man who does not lose. And I think he figured out that he missed out on becoming a hyperscaler with like Google, Amazon thing. All of the public market investors are like, oh, cloud is going to become a commoditized business. But clearly, that didn't happen. Like, cloud revenue, or like the hyperscalers, are now one of the most dominant players in the industry. And I think Larry Ellison was like, I'm not going to lose my chance to become like a hyper dominant player for the next 2-3 decades. And you kind of see this in the chart, right? The market gets excited. They're like, okay, we're going to back you. And then boom, they're like, no, you're not going to do it. But to me, this chart is like, do you think Ellison wins or not? And to me, he's been winning for 5 decades. I doubt he's going to be losing. I have a broader thesis about like data centers that I think my like take is that they have far more pricing power than people have, because to pull these data centers online, you have to get land with power, you have to get chips, you have to get tenants. It is like you have to assemble all of the really challenging Lego pieces. And right now, they haven't exerted their pricing power. But you're going to see Oracle, CoreWeave, all of these players in the next like few quarters and years being like, oh, we increase our prices, we increase our prices. And what are customers going to do? Say, sorry, that's too expensive? No, they have to pay. So I'm like starting to get really bullish on the data center trade, because that's what I think the real bottleneck is. Anyways, let's move on. Okay, so Lisa raises server CPU TAM forecast from roughly 60 billion to over 120 billion by 2030. CPU to GPU ratio is 1 to 8 to 1 to. Okay, this is absolute bullshit. I think this whole like CPU to GPU ratio thing that people are trying to peddle isn't actually fucking real. Like, so for context, I run a lot of agentic workloads myself, and I'm never like, oh wow, like I need more and more CPUs. Like, yes, there is more coordination. Yes, more CPUs will be used, but to say it's like we're gonna need way more CPUs to GPUs, like, break this down for a second. If you have CPUs that require even more GPU power, it assumes that every cycle of compute that you run through is giving you the correct answer. And these multi-agentic systems, if you have one assumption in the chain that's wrong, it means that your end output is going to be garbage. So what you have to do is like actually design high quality infrastructure that has strong evaluations at every point in time, so that your agentic systems don't go off the rails. Now, how do you ensure the output that your agents are doing is correct? Well, that's actually a really hard problem, and something that isn't sometimes even a problem you can solve with engineering, right? Like, let's say the agent's doing some research on something, and then from that research, it uses these findings and makes an assumption. But you realize some of the information it has is outdated, or it's something that you know that you didn't pass into context in the agent, and then it runs for 8 hours, and then you realize the end output is completely garbage because it made an incorrect mistake. So And also like the other thing here, right? CPUs, there's a lot of CPUs, and CPUs are not energy intensive, right? The infrastructure for like CPUs is like abundant. You can find data centers around the world that will like host CPUs. What makes GPUs challenging and so lucrative is that they have like very specialized power requirements, infrastructure requirements that you can't just like spin up tomorrow. Versus like CPUs, they're not that like actually intense. So this whole like narrative being pushed by AMD of like, oh, we need more CPUs. It's the fact that AMD has really bad GPUs that they have to pay their customers to use. Like they gave 8% of their company for Meta to use their GPUs. That's how bad their product is, in my view. And I think they kind of figured out that the market's catching on. So instead, they're saying, hey, what if we peddle this like agentic CPU shortage? I mean, they're doing a good job. And Intel, they're basically a lackluster company. Like Intel's revenue has been flat for so many years now, even like in recent quarters. So I feel like the lazy companies, Intel and what do you call it? Intel and AMD are kind of like, huh, I wonder if we can peddle this narrative that the market will buy. And clearly the market is buying it. So their stock price goes up. And the other offender in this whole thing, I think, is ARM. Like, look at this. So they license it. They don't even have any fabs. But like, okay, $220. They hit earnings of. They actually guided lower earnings for next quarter. But let's say it's 60 cents. Let's say it's optimistically $3 for financial year 27. You're already paying like north of like 60, 70 times earnings. The amount that ARM has to grow for this valuation to make sense is absurd. And okay, if you do believe in this like CPU GPU ratio changing, all of this stuff still needs memory. Like that doesn't fundamentally change. So to me, it's just so absurd seeing things get repriced. Intel, I have a bit more sympathy for because I'm like, okay, they have the fabs, they actually have the raw physical power. But like AMD, they don't. They're beholden to TSMC's contracts and their relationships. And of course, Intel is like the whole supply, like American supply chains. I'm like, okay, whatever. There's a bit of a narrative there. It's being pumped by Trump and the government. So like, cool, it's a good trade. But if I'm talking like real investment, who has real pricing power, it is not the CPU players. And it's just a narrative being peddled. Anyway, that is my rant over. AOSL, what do they do? Dun, dun, dun. I don't know. I think I'm kind of going to unfollow the Valuist. I've kind of just not really great content. More noise than signal. Okay, coherent earnings. Let's look at this. Dun, dun, dun. So this is another optics play. Coherent. Okay, so it's down 4%. Let's look at the chart. So of course, kind of like most optical names, guiding for about $1.60 of earnings next quarter, and pretty like good growth across the board. So I mean, let's do some quick math here. Looking about $6, $7, $8 of earnings, very roughly. It's once again like you're paying massive forward multiples for something like this. But let's see if there's anything from the earnings. I find like even if you're not going to buy this stuff, like it's interesting reading like are there clues you can get about where the sector is trending, because all these things are like upstream, downstream supply drivers. So okay, AXTI Coherent is ramping up INP capacity. So this is indium phosphide for context, which is like a raw material. So Coherent's accelerated internal 6-inch ramp, now 1 quarter ahead of schedule. Their biggest buyers are becoming their own suppliers. Okay. Stripping AXT of its scarcity premium and relegating them to an overflow vendor. The $2 billion investment capacity is doubling. The indium phosphide shortage is evaporating ahead of schedule. AXT has left massive with a $632 million capital-heavy expansion to market that is rapidly commoditizing. Yeah, this is the other thing about optics, right? Like, yes, it's a sexy narrative. Yes, it's running ahead, but like the defensibility really isn't there. Like, if companies can ramp up capacity and they're already cannibalizing each other like this early in, uh, I just think a lot of people are in for a bag of hurt. So yeah, this is it. This is exactly it. The market's slowly waking up, being like, hey, why are we overpaying massively for optics? This stuff is still a few years out. And to me, the best case scenario is we see like some of these optics charts, right? Like they're ridiculous. Seriously. Like if they come back to like maybe even, let's say 90, right? Let's say that 90 to 100 range, I think that's where you get some really good like entry points. But right now, I would not be touching optics. Like, and to think like, oh, surely it'll just keep going up with all the other charts. Like, I would also be careful against that because throughout this build out, we have seen sectors that were hot get repriced. Like my favorite example of this is CoreWeave, or any of the data center companies, right? Super hot at one point in time, uh, 183, and they just got dumped to the markets. Like, you know what, we hate data centers, and now they're kind of like proving themselves back, and we're seeing like this nice recovery pull through. But you have to earn your spot, and I think optics have not earned their spot yet. So I would not be surprised if they continue to re-rate down as time goes along. Cool. Semtech. What is Semtech? You know, this supply chain is so interesting. Like every time you think you've like seen all the tickers there are, there's always some new ticker that comes around and you're like, oh, that's interesting. Uh, let's pull up a little research tab. Semtech, what are you? Analog mixed signal semiconductors. I think this is probably some optics play as well, once again. What does do? Three sentences. I guess semis. Dun, 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 dun. Semtech, American company, mixed analog, AI data center networking. Okay, the power of LoRa. Are they an optics play or something else? Okay, diversified semiconductor play. So a lot of like IoT, interconnect. Okay, I've kind of seen like a few companies like this, where they kind of were like this analog semiconductor company, not very sexy. Now they're all kind of positioning to like, figure out like how do they get in on the AI trade. I don't think it's wrong, but a lot of these things are very expensive, and I think there'll be some better opportunities to get in, rather than buying like very inflated charts. Cool. So Amazon Silicon Business hit a 20 billion annualized run rate in Q1. Uh, three data center chips. Like Tranium, I don't know. I still haven't seen the real case for it. Let's look at the Amazon chart. How is it doing? Okay, it actually finally moved. Year to date, 18% from 200 to 273. So glad it finally moved. But like seriously, in 1 year, 47%. Like if you're betting that Amazon is gonna like do really well because of AI, there's just cleaner ways to get AI exposure. I mean, from a forward PE ratio, I actually haven't checked Amazon, but let's say $2 of earnings. Once again, you're paying massive forward PE ratios for a company that has like average chips and doesn't have manufacturing capacity. Like if you're gonna bet on Amazon, I'd still bet on Google at these prices. Um, yeah. Anyway, moving on. AMD trusts 2 nanometer production to Samsung Foundry. So Samsung, I'm bullish on. It's like they have the technology, they have the fabs. Let's pull up the chart here. Samsung Electronics. Okay, 271,000 Korean won. Yeah, nice little pump. Okay. So Samsung, it's just got a larger market cap. It is going to be, I think, going to earn the most amount of money than any company next year in terms of like raw earnings. So it's going to be, yeah, super, like, it's not a bad bet. I think there's so much going for Samsung. They have a stake in NAND, they have a stake in DRAM slash HBM, they have the fabs. It's really a powerhouse in my view. I just, for me personally, it doesn't have the kind of juice that I want in my portfolio. Like year to date up 125 versus something like Hynix, which is smaller, has moved up. Oh, I thought it was a bit more interesting. 1 year 781, and 1 year is, yeah, okay. So like on a slightly longer time horizon, Hynix is like done better, but Samsung is not a bad bet. Like if you would be like, would I hold Samsung like 5 to 10 years from now? Absolutely. They're complete savages in my view. Okay, Coherence. Orders are undergoing a step function increase, backlog reaching an all-time high. To me, I think there will be a great opportunity to buy optics in the future. I just don't think it's now. But the fundamentals are there, the price isn't. So I hold out. Let's see. Is there anything else? Okay, Samsung. Samsung Semiconductor Speed Race. Samsung brings forward P5 Fab 2 groundbreaking. So they'll break ground on P5 Fab 2, P6, the final production. Okay, so I will never pretend that I understand something that I don't. And I don't understand what a lot of these acronyms are and what has been going on with Samsung's fabs. So let's take a quick bit of time to understand what is going on here. Eli 5 basic semi knowledge. Cool. Building a new chip factory, P5 Fab 2 in South Korea. They're starting 6 months earlier than pinned. They're in semiconductor winter. Okay, so it's the biggest single fab in the world. Okay, it will double their DRAM output, and the total investment is $88 billion. That is insane. And I think when you think of the flow of money, right, you have hyperscalers that are buying a bunch of chips. Then, and the semiconductor companies or the chip companies, they have to put it into construction. And there is a case for like going down the supply chain, but when it comes to construction, I'm not sure what the margins are and like, is there any specialized process? Because building the fab is the challenging bit, and they're the ones that keep the margins. Like I think a lot of these semiconductor companies are now sitting on like 50, 60, 70, 80% margins for certain product lines. And a lot of people are like, oh, there's going to be all this capacity that comes online that's going to crush prices. And once again, that is an incorrect assumption. Demand is just so insanely high. But let's understand what are Samsung's other expansion plans. So explain to me what is P5 and Fab 2. I want to understand Samsung's expansion plans. Yeah, I type terribly to LLMs. That's kind of just how I do it. So that's the city. That was their first fab built in 2017. Okay, so the final phase of their campus. Then they have multiple, more than one fab inside each building. So Fab 1 was the first factory building, and Fab 2 is the second factory building in phase 5. Cool. Wow, okay, so after this, they'll need an entirely new campus. Once P5 buildings are running by 2029, they'll add 600,000 wafers, which matches their entire current DRAM output. So let's say by 2029, right? How long will it take for their to find a new campus of the size they need next? Because everyone's looking at the next expansion, but what happens for the expansion after that? I think that is the more interesting question. So they're working on it, but they have to plan a decade or more ahead. Um, so in Yongin, I guess, even bigger than Thing, uh, you need a lot of water and power, transportation, government permits, workforce. Okay, so they won't be running out of space. It's not land, it's equipment. ASML, there we go, the final bottleneck. When would ground even start being broken here? Late 26. Okay, so the land was purchased 2025. 250 billion dollars. That is insane. Um, Chips rolling off the first line. Okay, so late 26. So in 4 years, they'll be up and running. That sounds ambitious, or no. This is where I find LMs are like not really great at predicting the future, and you have to take what they say with a grain of salt. Conservative side. So TSMC broke in 2021, not operational in 2026 because they construct with the US thing. P1 took 2.5 years. Installing equipment, qualifying the process. Okay, so what about how many ASML EUV machines they'll need? Will ASML be able to keep up by then? All right, so ASML is the thing. So by 2027, they want to get about 80 machines or 90 long term. So when you think about Samsung plus TSMC plus Intel, Hynix, and Micron all expanding at once, it's tight. And Samsung alone will need 90 to 120 machines for just one campus. And Samsung isn't the only customer. Not everyone needs the machines at the same time. But ASML is the tightest it's been. And ASML's new management is like a lot more business focused. So to me, this is, I think, where the opportunity for ASML really kicks in. They have not exerted their pricing power in the way the memory companies have. But the really big story here is that TSMC a few days ago, TSMC ASML machines. Typically, the semiconductor supply chains, everyone's played nice with each other. But TSMC recently said at a public conference that, hey, we're not going to buy the latest ASML machines because they're too expensive. And look, TSMC's margins are already great, so they're really trying to say, like, you know what, we're going to squeeze you before you squeeze us. But I don't think TSMC really has a hand here. And the other thing is that TSMC is saying is we'll just use your older machines rather than buying your latest ones. But there's a service fee to run the older machines. And ASML is going to say, hey, you know what? If you're not going to buy our latest machines, we're just going to rank up the price of the old machines for the service fee. There's nothing you can do about it. ASML is the world's most insane monopoly, and it doesn't even come close. And I've actually recently been started like building a position in it because I think that is the ultimate bottleneck. So yeah, cool. Yeah, we went really deep in fab construction. I am Yeah, I think that's really about it for today. Thank you all for tuning in. I'm trying to like get a bit more consistent with timings, but the rough vibe is around like this 9:15 to 9:45, 10 a.m. EST. So thank you all for tuning in, and